All right, guys, I apologize that this did not record in class. I went to my Zoom dashboard and everything looked different. So I had to reconfigure everything, and I'll go ahead and, excuse me, I'll go ahead and record this for you here so that you do have a lesson to refer to when you're studying for your Unit 1 test. We're going to breeze through it quickly, though, because we did already go through it in class. So we went over our house rules, which were just pretty basic, and we had also gone over them at the grill and chill, and they are in your binder. So these are just basic reminders of class expectations. We also took a minute to open up our preface section of our binder to, I think it was page 5, if I'm not wrong, and make these two changes to our paperwork for our final project. The actual paper is due 5/17/26, and the written report, that's the written report, and the presentation will be on 5/19/26. So we made those changes. Then we moved on to our lesson. So what is science? Science is an organized way of gathering and analyzing evidence about the natural world. And the goals in science are about investigating so that we can understand things, explaining events in nature, and then using those explanations to make useful predictions. We talked about if I had a little ball of paper in my hand and I dropped it to the floor, okay, we can open our hand several times and watch it fall, watch it fall, watch it fall. Okay, we've investigated now. We can explain those events. We can say, you know what? Gravity is a force that pulls any two bodies together, and the body with the greater mass is going to have a greater gravitational pull on the body with less mass. So in this case, Earth is going to have a greater pull on the little piece of paper than the paper is going to have on the Earth, which means the paper will move towards the Earth in a very visible way. And then we predicted if we open our hand again, what's going to happen to the paper? It is going to fall again. We talked about scientific method and how it isn't just necessarily a straight line, but it is an organized and systematic way of going through a process of observation, question, hypothesis, prediction, and experiment. This is how we work in science. We talked about how we use our daily observations, and sometimes we'll see things that make us wonder. So then we form a question, and then we form a hypothesis that we can test. And sometimes you need to revise your hypothesis, sometimes you need to revise your methods, but scientific method is a very streamlined, straightforward process. Now, this is a question that shows up on every midterm and final I issue, and it is about the 3 types of experimental variables. And we like to call these independent variable what you can change. Sometimes you will see the independent variable called the manipulated variable because it is what you are manipulating or changing. Then there is a dependent variable, which is sometimes called a responding variable, and that is what changes based on what you change. And then we have a control, and a control is what you keep the same. And it's very important that we work with controlled experiments. So I gave the example of if you have a terrible headache and you take a Tylenol and your headache goes away, you might be thinking to yourself, perhaps that's a cause and effect situation. I changed something, I took a Tylenol, and the response or the what changes based on what I changed is that the headache went away. But you'd have to repeat that multiple times to ensure that that's actually the cause, right? Otherwise, it could have just been a one-off thing. But if you took a Tylenol and put on a cold compress and went into a dark room and your headache went away, now you have too many changes, too many independent variables. That is not a controlled experiment. And because it's not controlled, you can't say which of those changes made your headache go away. So we want to keep all aspects of an experiment the same except for your independent variable. This is also a question that shows up on every midterm and final exam that I offer, and it is about what is science. Um, when it comes to hypotheses, what are hypotheses? What is a hypothesis? And a hypothesis is an idea that can be tested, and it is either accepted or rejected. You can also say supported or unsupported, and the outcome must be repeatable, or you could also say reproducible. Like I said, with the headache thing, you have to be able to repeat that just giving Tylenol multiple times before you can determine whether or not it is what is causing your headache to go away. And another question that's on every midterm and final that I offer is about scientific theory versus scientific law. A scientific law is what happens, a fact, and a scientific theory is why it happens, an explanation. So if we go back to gravity as our example, gravity is both a theory and a law. If I hold a ball out in my hand and let it go, it will fall. It will fall to the ground every time. It is never going to shoot up into the sky, because if it does, we have big problems we need to deal with as a planet. And a theory would explain why, and that would go back to the definition of gravity I gave as the attractive force between any two bodies. So the bigger body is going to have a greater pull, so the ball is going to fall towards Earth because Earth has a greater gravitational pull on the ball than the ball has on the Earth, though in reality they are both pulling toward each other. We talked about biases. A bias is a tendency to favor one thing over another, which can make results unfair or inaccurate. It's like having a favorite sports team and always thinking they're the best even when they lose. In science, this can happen when researchers unintentionally lean towards certain results or use methods that favor one outcome over another. We all have biases because we are humans, and humans are emotional beings. We are not computers. We are not capable of complete objectivity. We will always be subjective, which means we will always have our biases and our opinions and our emotions uh, affecting whatever we think or do. But in science, we need to be aware of that tendency so that we can make an effort to be as objective as possible. So the word for life science is biology. Ology means the study of, bio means life. And when you put those together, you get the study of life, biology. There are a lot of ologies. And you will find that as we go through class this year, there will be a lot of Greek and Latin roots and suffixes, prefixes, word parts. And it's important to familiarize yourself with some of those because they will help you decode a word you've never seen before. If you approach something brand new, if you know how the parts of that word break down, you can sometimes get yourself a good definition just by context and understanding what those words are or parts of words are. We talked about gathering data through observations, which are things like taste, sight, smell, touch, hearing. But also we talked about how that we do have another sense called proprioception, which gives us our body position in space and whether we are moving or whether we are still, upside down. We can close our eyes and shake our head and we know our head is moving, right? You can also close your eyes if you're in a car and tell if you're turning left or right, even if you can't see that you're turning left or right. So observations are information we take in using our senses, and they come in the form of quantitative and qualitative. Qualitative data, like the stuff at the bottom there, focuses on qualities, characteristics, and experiences. What color did you see? What did you smell? Was it a high pitch, a low pitch, a loud sound, a soft sound? And quantitative data, on the other hand, is numerical and measurable and focuses on quantities, amounts, and frequencies. So that's stuff like what was the temperature, what was the speed, what was the airspeed, what was the angle, that type of thing. So essentially, qualitative data answers why or how, while quantitative data answers how many, how much, or how often. So we used this little tarantula as an example. We can say a tarantula has 8 legs, sorry, and that is a quantitative observation because you can count them. It is measurable, it deals with numbers. And we could say that he feels fuzzy. Well, feels fuzzy is qualitative. It's about the experience of touching him. Now, inferences are based upon prior knowledge and experience. So if we understand and know our prior knowledge that mammals are the only animals with true hair, um, and that a tarantula hair must not be real hair. It's something else. Mammals are warm-blooded, and the hair helps keep them warm. Well, tarantulas aren't warm-blooded, so that hair must not function as insulation. So then we can tell ourselves, based on our prior knowledge, that this observation of hair on a tarantula isn't true hair, and it's not to keep him warm. So what might it be for? And actually, it's for helping them sense small movements around them and keeping them safe. Predictions. And now the weather will be sunny unless it rains. And that's pretty much how we feel about weathermen, isn't it? Meteorologists tend to do that to us all the time. The other day, I had a 3% chance of rain and it poured for an hour. So predictions we make based upon our data that we've collected, our observations, both quantitative and qualitative, and our inferences. Now we took some time to classify. Classifying can be done in multiple different ways. So we used this series of shapes to classify them different ways and see if we could determine how they were being classified. So for this first example right here, we all agreed that these items were being classified by color: yellow, blue, red, green. For the next example, we all agreed that these were being classified as animals, modes of transportation, or fruit or vegetables. So then we were like, what does this mean? How is this really being classified? It was more about what type of object are we looking at? Sort of a general what type of object. Machines, maybe. Animals, machines, and plants. And then for this example, we all agreed that these were classified by solid figures and figures made with outlines. For this example, we all agreed that this had to do with locomotion. Apples and acorns don't move. Cyclists use wheels. Airplanes, bats, and butterflies all use flight. And the bear, the beaver, and the caterpillar all creeped or used legs. And then for this last example, we decided, again, this was a different what type kind of in general, but we said mammals at the top, insects in the middle. The airplane kind of didn't qualify as any of those, and then plants at the bottom. We also noted that the red figure of the person on the bicycle, it depended upon whether we were classifying that based upon it being a human or whether we were classifying it based upon it being a mode of transportation, that you could interpret that figure in two different ways. We talked about models, how models can range from graphs to the globe, and that we will be using models this year. Sometimes models are helpful when you are trying to visualize something that is very, very small, like a cell, or very, very large, like a solar system. And models can often be helpful in visualizing processes, and we'll be doing that when we deal with like photosynthesis or respiration, for example. There will be some models that we use. We talked about all the different opportunities for working in biology, and here are all the ologies. Look at all the ologies on the left. Zoology, study of animals. Microbiology, study of small living things. Mycology, study of fungi. Um, Ecology, the study of the environment. So there's lots of different, or not just the environment, basically how it all interacts. There's lots of different opportunities to work in biology, and here were just some. We talked about how we should always be curious, honest, open-minded, skeptical, and creative. Curiosity and creativity really go hand in hand, and that's what gets us to some great scientific discoveries. Honesty and open-mindedness also go hand to hand. Open-mindedness meaning that when you are working in a lab or on an experiment or doing research, you might come across things you didn't expect, and you should be open to those things, those different and new things. And honesty, this goes back to a bias. Always report your data honestly, even if it's not what you expected it to be. Now, open-minded and skeptical tend to be thought of as opposites, but really they're not quite the same thing. Skepticism here has to do with not taking everything at face value and making sure that you understand that not all sources are equal. You should get your data from a good, reliable source. That is somebody that does not include influencers in your social media feed. You know, those are not necessarily reliable sources. So that's what it means to be skeptical here. Technology is spelled wrong. Somebody caught that for me. But here are more examples of where we use science in our lives. Technology, and technology doesn't have to be all these computer things. It can be a pencil. A pencil is technology. A sneaker is technology. Engineering that helps us build great things that we use in our day-to-day life. And then here are some scientists that have given us awesome positive impacts. And this year we'll be talking a lot about Franklin, for example, Darwin, and Mendel. These are all good ones. I think that's picture is for a different Franklin. Yeah, it is. Based on the date, that's a different Franklin. We'll be talking about Rosalind Franklin. That would be Benjamin Franklin. But Darwin and Mendel, for sure, we'll be talking about them a fair amount this year. And then here are your topics for your Unit 1 test. And I hope this helped. And I will see you next week. And hopefully we'll have everything all good to go for live recording.